All right, let's talk supplies, shall we? So I ended up using a variety of these, so I just wanted to show you what I've got. For paper, you can use just any watercolor paper. This is the Studio Watercolor Fabriano, so it's not the highest end, but it's perfectly adequate. It's 140 pounds, so it's nice, got a nice texture to it. I also like Canson and Strathmore make good watercolor paper, so it's not, it's as long as you get any of the good ones. And I'm using a 9 by 12. And let's look at palettes next. So sometimes I use this, I think for most of this class I used the palette paper. And it's sheets of this, let me get the pad for you. I just fold them in half because it's a better size for me usually. And they come in gray and white. I don't think it much matters which color you use. And it's really shiny, and they're great for travel too. Because what I do when I'm traveling is I take my sketchbook and I, put, not dirty ones like this, but I put several clean ones in there, and then I can use them when I'm painting and traveling. And they're also actually great for if you paint in your sketchbook and there's something not quite dry or it needs more time to dry, I stick a clean one of these in there, and since it's shiny, it doesn't stick and helps it dry. So that's the palette paper. And then toward the end of the class, I show you this, which I've shown in my Joyful Bouquet class and some other classes. It's an airtight palette with a silicone top and these little locks, and it works great for gouache or watercolor. I tried it with acrylic and aqua gouache, and it's okay, but it will dry eventually, and then it's harder to clean out because those have acrylic in them and they dry. And once they dry, they're in there. They're never being reconstituted. So I recommend it more for watercolor or gouache. But it allows you to get the consistency right by adding your paint and then adding some water. And to do that, I use these little pipettes. I think I might have a link to these as well. And then you can add, like I can see this one needs a little bit of water. And you can mix them up and get them ready to use. And they're just kind of always ready, which I love. Of course, it only works if you close them, right? I've done that before. It doesn't do much good if you leave the top off. But since it's gouache, you just add water and mix, and you're good to go. So this is great. Also for travel, the only thing is you don't want to tip it upside down. Done that, and it makes a mess. Okay, let's go on to paints. I stayed with the palette that this color palette, and I'll scan this in case you like these colors too, even though it's half of a sheet. What I did is I made something, and then I just was messing around with colors and a fan brush, and then I used part of it for a collage, but I just love the way these colors interacted here. So, and see, you save something, and now it became a guide for the colors that I wanted to use in this piece. So what I did a mix of actually 3 types of paint, technically, because I have regular gouache here, and then I have aqua gouache here, here, and here. This one is regular gouache, and then 2 watercolors. So I mix paints all the time, as long as you know that you're mixing between the water solubles and the not. And if you, I've definitely mixed aqua gouache with regular gouache on paper, but there's no real reason to do that. I mean, just use one or the other. It's just these are the colors that I wanted. And I brought out all the indigos to just show them to you because I use a lot of indigo. So in the regular gouache, which means that you can let it dry, but that it can be reconstituted with water. If it can't be, and then it was acrylic or aqua gouache. So, like, honestly, can't remember what I did this in, but if it was aqua gouache, yep, it was. It was this olive color. See, I cannot get that. I mean, I could probably eventually scrub it, but if I used the regular gouache, then I would be able to get it dissolved again in the water. So, all right, so that's gouache, meaning it can be reconstituted with water. Acryl gouache, meaning it cannot be. And of course, watercolor can always be reconstituted with water. And the reason I ended up getting out of these indigos is because I grabbed the Winsor & Newton, which this is my favorite. Well, I was going to say it's my favorite brand of gouache, but I really love the Holbein. It's acryl gouache though. So my favorite brand of regular gouache is the Winsor & Newton. Then I like Turner. And my favorite brand of acryl gouache is the Holbein. And they all come with indigo, and indigo is just my favorite dark to use, so that's why I've become like an indigo collector. But this indigo, you'll see when I get it out, is the Winsor & Newton one is a little bit more like a royal blue. It's not very indigo, and so is the Turner. They call them indigo, but they're just more blue than I wanted. Then Turner Acryl makes this blue-black, but all you have to do, it's not hard, is to take whatever blue you have, even if it's a primary blue or not even a dark blue, the darker the blue the better, and then add some black and keep going until you get the darkness that you want. So then I used this olive, which I had remembered being really green, but you'll see when it paints out, it comes out yellow, and I'll show you how I fix that. And then I do use this a lot for different things, ivory. Then I used a couple of watercolors, the Duochrome Oceanic. This is the Daniel Smith Luminescent watercolors, which means they have a pearly luminescent consistency, lots of fun. And then this is the Winsor & Newton Permanent Sap Green. Now I'm just showing you all this in case you're curious. You may hate blues and greens and want to go a completely different direction. I just wanted to show you what I did in case you wanted to know. And I do, I think, mention this later, but this is one of my favorite paints and colors of all time, this Cobalt Turquoise Light by Winsor & Newton gouache. Very intense and beautiful. Then I also used, let's talk brushes. I stuck with, for this painting, I like these Princeton Velvet Touch rounds. So I went back and forth between a 2 and a 6, and depending on what you need. If you want to do something narrower, like a line, you can get something like this, which is either called a liner or a rigger brush, and it'll give you long fluid lines. Then I did use the Bright shape. That's what this is, a number 4 silver Bristlon Bright, and to get some kind of square shapes on the flowers. For details, and once in a while I'll use these Tombow pens. You don't need this in this class. I just thought I'd show them to you if you've never seen them. They're kind of fun because you can take, let's say I use them in a stem, and let's say you know, do something like this, and in fact I've done this before. It's super fun, and then you can take a different color, and so it's essentially a marker, right? Which you can get an interesting effect by then getting your brush with water on it and then it turns in, you know, basically into watercolor and gives you a more painterly look. You'll get that bleeding, but with a little bit of an outline. I did a whole page one time of these with leaves and just playing with how the markers dissolve and move, how the ink moves. Anyway. And they'll change and move as it dries. Those are Tombow, okay. I do love the Pentel Sunburst Metallic Medium Gel Pen. I buy them a lot on Amazon. They give, what I like about them, they go over almost everything except maybe oil pastel. And they always just reliable. I use them to sign my paintings a lot, and I use them for gold metallic details. I also use a variety of brushes. Pencils. And the brands are probably more important than the colors because you can pick out the colors that you like. But the Super Color, this is the Caran d'Ache, that Swiss maker. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. And then Stabilo and Faber-Castell. And what I like about all of these, and here's a Prismacolor. I don't know if this one is water soluble or not. Let's see. Because I tend to want to get the water soluble ones. Yeah, it's not. I mean, eventually it is, but not the way these are. These are like the Tombow, you know, they can be reconstituted. So they're great to sketch things out, or even go on top for different things, but you can do a lot of them, and I've ended up collecting many, but these are the colors that I used in this class. Every time I go to an art store, I get a few more colors, and they usually are either the Stabilo or the Cran d'Ache. All right, let's see if I left anything out. For water jar, I just use a mason jar. Nothing fancy there. And we did use some Posca. So I have a Posca collection just because I'm obsessed with these. This is like, here's how I think about my Posca pens. They're about the cost of a Starbucks coffee. So depending on where you are in the world, an expensive cup of coffee. So sometimes I'll say I would, you know, if we're out and about, my husband and I are like, no, I'll skip the Starbucks and I will stick it in my Posca budget. But I use these a lot, especially the ivory. And so you'll find your colors that you like, and I go over, I do different effects with them and do all kinds of things. So that's supplies that I used in the class. And you, again, do not need, please hear me on this, you do not need all these supplies. You can go with what you have, and or maybe watch most of the class and get an idea of what you have and what you'd like to create, and then get yours. All right, let's get started.